Middle-aged rancher hadn't talked to women in years until 3 Apache women begged him to take them in. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Thor Maddox hadn't spoken more than a dozen words to anyone in nearly 3 years. He made sure of it. The land past Dry Knife Ridge was rough and isolated, thick with juniper, low valleys cut deep by runoff. No good trails leading in a route, unless you knew where to put your horse's hooves. That's why he'd settled there. That and the silence. He was 4'6" now, built tall and rangy, arms thick from work, his face weather-beaten and quiet. A faint scar cut across his left cheekbone, a leftover from a cavalry skirmish long ago. Most folks down in Copperoon had long since stopped asking what he was doing way out there alone. They'd heard enough about his wife and the child she carried, both taken by the measles the winter of '74. What hadn't burned in the fever burned later, in the fire. Since then, he'd worked the land, raised no cattle, but traded fence work and repairs for dried food and ammunition. Didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't open his door for anyone. So when the sound came, low, uneven footsteps crunching over the hard-packed trail leading from the edge of the ridge, his body reacted before his thoughts caught up. He laid down the piece of pine he'd been carving, stood up slowly from the porch chair, and rested a hand near Theo's revolver hanging on his hip. His eyes narrowed. Too heavy for deer, too light for a horse, not a wagon. He stepped down into the yard. They appeared slowly around the fence line, as if unsure they'd reached anything at all. 3 figures, all barefoot, clothes torn and dusty. The oldest looked to be around 30, tall and square-shouldered with cuts on her arms, a busted lip, her dark tie back in a makeshift wrap. She walked with purpose, even if a stride showed pain. The middle one, maybe mid-20s, was limping slightly, her dress slipping off one shoulder, neckline torn, exposing the soft rise of a chest and the thin bruising around her collarbone. A hand stayed her sides, fingers twitching with uncertainty. The youngest, barely out of girlhood, stuck behind the 2 like eyeshadow, a warm blanket wrapped around her like a shield. Thorne didn't move, didn't speak. The oldest one, Asha, though he didn't know her name yet, raised her chin. "We need shelter," she said. "We don't aim to steal. We just need a place to stay. Few nights will work." Her voice was raw but steady. Shedden plead, didn't explain. The girl behind her, Nomi, looked ready to bawl out any moment, her wide eyes flickering to the tree-line, the dirt, the sky. The middle one, Leah, shifted away, trying not to lean too hard on a bad ankle. Shedden looked at him directly, only downward, like waiting for a blow or door slammed shut. Thorne's jaw clenched. He didn't ask why they were out here. Didn't need to. The bruises told enough. The torn fabric, the weight of them would meet his eyes long. He remembered seeing looks like that before, after raids, after soreners, after cruel hands had taken too much. His eyes moved to the pump by the fence, then to the barn, then back to the 3 women. He gave a single nod, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. They stood frozen for a moment. Then Asher moved first, guiding Leah gently, glancing at Thorne. Only once. He didn't stop them, didn't speak, didn't reach for his pistol either. That more than anything told them they were safe. For now, he didn't offer them a house. He wouldn't, not yet. But he opened the band door wide. Inside it was clean. He kept it that way. Straw fresh, water barrel full, extra blankets folded near. Thuakench. He'd slept in that van himself more nights than he could count. That night they slept in the loft. Thorne sat out on the porch, shotgun resting across his thighs. His mind wasn't quiet. Part of him wondered if he was being foolish, letting strangers in, women who might be hunted. Maybe there were men close behind them. Maybe it was a trap. But then he remembered Leah's limp, the way Nomi clung her sister's arm like a child, her voice never rising above a whisper. He remembered how Esher hadn't flinched, had looked him square, though bruised and filthy, and said, "We'll work." The next morning, hadn't go to the barn. He hauled firewood, fed the gelling, repaired the gate hinge. Then he found his tin cup, cleaned, and placed upside down by the basin. The water bucket had been emptied and refilled. Someone had scrubbed Thetrao, even recoiled the rope he used to haul water from the well. He looked out toward the barn, squinting against the rising sun. Leah stood just outside, scooping hay into the mule's pen. Her movements were careful, slow from a limp, but steady. Her shawl had slipped down her back, exposing the dark full off her hair and the neckline of a torn dress again. She didn't pull it up right away. Maybe she didn't notice. Or Maybesh didn't care. She didn't glance at him. Not yet, but she must have known he was watching. Inside, Asha was stacking kindling by the stove. Nomi sat near the fence line, half hidden, legs drawn up beneath her dress. She looked toward Thorn briefly, then quickly down again. That day, he left food on the porch. Smoked meat, a can of beans. Coffee grounds said nothing, just went back to working the south fence. When he came back, the food was gone, the plate cleaned, left exactly where he'd said it. The women stayed another night, then another. No demands, no questions, no raised voices. Thorn didn't ask what had happened, but he knew. Not details, not names, but enough. Enough to keep the ban open. Enough to lay out 3 more blankets in the loft. Enough to sit outside each night with his shotgun resting easy, eyes on the dark line where the hills met the sky. He didn't want company, heading for years. But you and a man to shut the door on someone already torn down, and they weren't asking for much. Not yet. It had been 4 days. Thorn Maddox didn't count them on purpose. He just knew. He kept track the way he always had, by chores completed, by how many nights the band lantern had flickered through the slats, by the number of clean tin plates he found waiting for him each morning on Tepper Trail. The 3 women hadn't left. They hadn't asked to come inside the house either. That mattered to him. You weren't sure why, but it did. That morning, as the sun crept low over the ravine, he stepped out into the yard with a bucket of oats and found Leah already there. She wasn't moving fast. Her ankle was still swollen, but she stood barefoot in the hard soil, sleeves rolled to her elbows, feeding the mule with her hands. The animal took to her, didn't buck, didn't flinch. Thorn watched from the steps a moment, longer than he meant to. Her dress hung looser than before, worn at the seams, torn again above her chest. The collar had fallen lower overnight, exposing more of her shoulders and chest than was proper, and she hadn't fixed it yet. Not out of carelessness, out of exhaustion maybe, or because she'd stopped worrying about it. He cleared his throat softly. Leah turned, saw him, and hesitated, but Shedden pulled the fabric up. She looked him in the eye. Not long, but long enough that she turned back to the mule. You don't have to feed it, Thorn said, voice rough from disuse. She didn't look back. It likes me. He didn't argue. He set the bucket down, rubbed a scar on his jaw with the side of his thumb. The air smelled like dry hay and ash. After a moment, he asked what he hadn't yet. You 3 running from someone. Leah's body stiffened. The moment stretched. Ash's voice came from behind. We are not runaways. Thorn turned. She stood near the well now, arms crossed, shapied. Her lip had begun to heal, but the cut still pulled in her words. We were taken, she said flatly, from a camp northward. Men named Riek and 4 others claimed they came with food and trade. Tied up the men, took what they wanted. We got away 2 nights later. Thorn didn't ask what took what they wanted meant. He didn't need to. Bastards were drunk when we slipped out. Asha continued. Took a mule, crossed creek near Silver Rock. Lost the mule, kept going. She jerked her chin toward the ridge. Heard from a woman in Breno town. There was a man up here who don't ask questions. I don't, Thorn essayed. Silence settled again. Asha added, we don't mean to cause you trouble. We just need a place until it's safe to move on. He didn't reply. He just looked at them. Asha standing like she was holding up the world. Leah, who hadn't turned back yet, and Nomi sitting small by the bandwing, barely speaking. They brought nothing with them. No bags, no bedding, no shoes. Nothing a person would bring if they had the choice. You got people left? He asked. No, Asher said. No Tanamore. He nodded slowly once. That afternoon, he led them inside. Only different room, kitchen, table, stove, nothing more. He didn't sit, just left a folded quilt and a few clean clothes on the table. He'd kept them in a chest for years, his wife's old things. He hadn't touched them since the day she died. He didn't say where they came from, didn't explain, just left the room and closed the door behind him. When he came back near sundown, the clothes were gone. The sear been folded again, neater than before, and a pot of beans simmered on the stove. The fire was banked, the floor swept. A plate sat on the table with hot cornbread and boiled eggs. No one said anything about it. That night, Leah stood on the porch alone. Her dress had been mended roughly at the shoulder with thick gray thread. It held better now. She watched the stars without speaking. Thorn leaned against the post, arms folded. "Thank you," she said, barely audible. He didn't answer, but she didn't seem to expect one. Behind them, inside, Asher stirred the coals while Nomi hummed low under her breath, wrapped in the quill he'd given them. The hum wasn't cheerful. It was low, tired, but it was something. For the first time in a long while, the house wasn't quiet. It was something else, something alive, and Thorn wasn't sure yet what to make of that. The day settled into a rhythm neither planned nor spoken. Thorn rose before. First light, lit the stove, split wood, and walked the fence lines. When he returned around mid-morning, the porch steps had already been swept, the ash pan emptied, and the barn mucked out. The women didn't wait for instruction. They worked without needing to be asked, without needing to be thanked. Leah's ankle improved slowly. She moved with a noticeable limp, but pushed through it, carrying water buckets with both hands, washing his extra shades without being told to. When Thorn tried to carry the pail himself one morning, she took it from him firmly. "I can," she said. He let go. Isha was harder to read. She didn't trust easily. He could see that, but she didn't challenge him either. She moved through the house with a purpose, inspecting walls, checking the pantry, clearing brush away from the foundation. She asked once if there was a rifle she could use for hunting. Thorn told he had a spare. She didn't press it further, but from then on, she made sure to stack firewood higher, cut more kindling, keep the rifle near the door when he wasn't home. Nomi remained quiet. The girl barely left his sister's side. She clung to routine like a tether, sweeping the band twice a day, brushing the mule with slow, deliberate strokes, sorting dry beans into neat little piles on the porch table. She had a habit of humming when she worked, always the same rhythm, low, comforting. It filled the air with a strange kind of calm. She still flinched at loud noises. She still wouldn't speak when men rode by on the far ridge. It was the third morning when Thorn found himself standing by the woodpile, watching them move through the yard. Not for any reason. He was just there. They didn't belong to him, and he didn't belong to them. But something had shifted. That evening, as the sun dipped, behind the ridge, Asher came inside carrying twarbets she trapped. Her tunic sleeves were rolled up, revealing her strong fams. Her skirt muddy to the knees. Thorn sat at the table, sewing a tay in the stallback. "Boil them?" Asher asked, motioning toward the rabbits. He nodded. "Use the garlic in the jar above the hearth. Little salt. You know how to cook?" "My wife used to." Asher paused. "I soften a little." "You never remarried." Hadn't answered that. Didn't need to. That night they all ate together. First time. No words about it. No ceremony. Just 4 tin plates and share pot. Nama said thank you. Leah watched him as she ate, her eyes resting on his hands more than his face. After supper, as they cleared the table, Leah lingered behind while Asher helped Nomi to the bed. "You married long?" she asked quietly, eyes in the empty plate in her hands. 8 years. Did you love her? Thorn didn't look at her. He stood by the stove, feeding in one more split look. Yes. Leah nodded slowly. She didn't cry. But her next question came after a long silence. She die here in the house? No, in town. His voice was flat, controlled. Measles took her and the baby. Leah twitched at the plate. I'm sorry. He didn't reply. She set the plate down gently. As she turned to go, he spoke again. Lo, you ain't safe yet. She stopped. Riek and his men. He continued. You think they still looking? I know they are. He turned. Look at her straight. Then we'll deal with it when it comes. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't nothing either. Later that night, when the house had gone still and the oil lamp was turned low, Thorne sat at the edge of the porch again. He didn't sleep much these days. Never had. The sound of crickets buzzed out in feverish, and an owl called once from the canyon mouth. The band door creaked slightly. He looked up. Leah stepped out, wrapped in the same patch shawl she had worn the first night. Her hair hung loose. She didn't speak. She walked Todd's steps, stood beside him, then slowly sat down, leaving space between them, but not much. After a while, she whispered, "Why do you let us stay?" I thought about that. Because of the bruises? Because of the silence? Because he'd seen too many people turned away for too little? He shook his head once. Didn't seem right to send you off. She nodded, quiet for a while. Then some folks would have. I ain't some folks. She smiled faintly, and that was it. No more words, no touching. Just two people sitting in the dark. Not running, not asking, just staying. By the seventh day, things began to settle like they were meant to be that way. The ranch was quiet, but not empty anymore. Thorne heard movement in the morning before he even got out of bed. Asher, walking across the porch bullets, lay his soft footsteps on the kitchen floor. The scrape of firewood being stacked, and Nomi's hum, always that low and even tuney just enough to let the world know she was still breathing. The barn had become their space by silent agreement. The women slept in the loft still, though Thorne had left the bedroom across the hall empty and clean. They never escaped to come in. He never told them not to. That morning, as he shaved over the wash basin, Thorne caught his own reflection and paused. The scour on his cheek looked deeper than it used to. The gray in his beard had spread. It didn't look like someone a woman would trust, let alone three of them. And yet they stayed. He walked outside and found Leah crouched by the vegetable patch, her long hair braided down her back, sleeves rolled again to the elbow. Her dress was stitched tight at the bust now, no longer hammering from her like it had first night. Still, low at the neckline but secure, her chest rose and fell steadily as she worked, dot on her forearms, a line of sweat down her temple. She glanced up when she heard his boots on the gravel. "You ever had beans grow this slow before?" she asked. "They are late 'cause the frost came too early this year," he said. "Won't see much until October." She wiped her brow with the back of her wrist. "Feels good to do something real." Thorne nodded. "Hard work keeps the noise down." Leah stood and met his gaze fully. She didn't look away this time. "There's a lot of noise in me," she said. He didn't answer. Didn't have to. That afternoon, a rider came. Not close, but close enough. Thorne saw the dust cloud from North Rim Trail. One rider moving slow. Not a lawman, not a trader, now gone. The horse was dark. The man sat easy, scanning the ground. Thorne stepped into the house, took his rifle down from the wall, loaded it calmly. Hadn't panic. Just watched from the backside of the house as the rider crested the far ridge and stopped. Waited a long while, then turned and rode back the way he came. At supper, heddled them. Ashes stiffened. "You see his face?" "No, he didn't." "Come close enough. Could be one of Reddick's. Could." She stayed at the wall, then stood. "We'll leave before dark." Thorne didn't move. "You're not going anywhere." Asher looked at him defiant. "You said it yourself." He said, "They're still looking. Running, though, won't help. You got food. You got walls. You got someone who'll shoot back if it comes to that." She didn't argue. Not because she agreed, but because Shek knew he wasn't wrong. Later that night, Leah stayed behind after dishes were done. Nomi had gone to bed early, and Dashes stood out by the fence, silent under the stars. Leah came to the doorway where Thorne sat oiling his rifle. "Why are you helping us?" she asked again. Quiet. He looked up. She was barefoot, standing in the doorway in that same patch dress, her arms folded into her chest. "You don't know us. You didn't do anything to deserve what was done to you," he said. "That's enough." She nodded, then walked over and sat beside him. Not close, but closer than before. "I wasn't touched," she said after a moment. "Not like Ashall was or what they tried with Nomi. They tried with me too. But I ran and I kept running. I didn't stop. Thorn didn't look at her dot. He set the rifle down. Don't matter whether they got close or not, he said. You carry it just the same. She looked at his hands, rough and scarred, then gently placed hers over his. I know yuckery things, too. They didn't speak for a while after that. Then Leah leaned her head on his shoulder, just once. Just long enough for the world to quiet. And Thorn didn't pull away. A week passed after the rider was spotted. No one else came down that trail, but the tension stayed. Asha took to walking the perimeter twice a day, always with Thorn's old Winchester strapped to her back. She said little, but her eyes missed nothing. The bruises on her arms had faded, but the guarded way she stood hadn't. Thorn didn't stop her. He'd seen women break from silence before, and Asher wasn't breaking. She was sharpening. Nomi had begun to speak in full sentences again, especially around animals. She helped brush down the mule every morning, fed the chickens without being told, and sat near Thorn's workbench in the barn in the evenings, watching him haul tools or hammer and new hinges. She didn't ask questions, but she stayed close. Thorn had noticed something too, something he hadn't expected. He no longer listened for silence. He listened for their movements. A creak of the porch lay his voice humming softly over the beanpot. Nomi dragging a chair across the floor too loudly. It should have annoyed him years ago. It might have. Now he found himself waiting for it. That morning while stacking lumber near the barn, Leah came out with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him. He took it with add. I fixed the hem on that flannel shirt you left by the wash basin, she said. Seemed a waste to throw it out. It was, he said. She smiled a little, eyes squinting in the sun, then turned and leaned against the fence beside him. You always been alone since her? She asked Dot mostly. No brothers, folks? Dead long before? She nodded, taking a slow sip. You ever think about leaving here? She asked. No, why not? Thorn glanced at her. I built it with her. Every board, every gate, every inch of fence. Don't know how to leave that behind. Leah's hand rested on the top rail. Her fingers brushed his by accident. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. We never had a place, she said quietly. Not really. Camp to camp. Army mover us twice. Then the traders. Then Riek. She looked toward the hills. This place. It's the first time I ever slept without dreaming of running. Thorn didn't answer, but something in his chest shifted. Not pain, not comfort either. Just wait. A familiar one. That evening, as dusk settled in, a horse approached. Not a stranger this time. Tom Belden, a local from Copperoon, rode up the trail and dismounted by the fence. Thor met him outside, rifle resting under one arm, not lifted, but visible. Tom raised a hand. Ain't trouble. Just came to warn you. Warn me. There's talk in town. That bounty trader Riek is asking about 3 Apache girls that went missing near. Deverd claims he paid for 'em. Says they are runaways. No proof, just noise. But he's putting up flyers, offering coin. Thorn's jaw tightened. Town marshal ain't lifting a finger. Says he don't meddle with property disputes unless they are in town limits. Thorn didn't respond, just nodded once. Tom glanced toward the band. That flyer reaches Thurong's sword. They'll come sniffing. I'm away. Tom reached into his TH bag, handed him a folded sheet. The flyer. It showed sketches. Crude but unmistakable. Esh's angular face. Nomi's timid eyes. Even Leah's neckline drawn lower thanral. Beneath it read, Fugitive's property stolen from contract. Reward paid on return. Thorn folded the paper slowly and shoved it into his coat. You sure you know what you're doing, Maddox? Tom asked. I do. Tom tipped his hat and rode off. That night, Thorn brought the flyer inside. Leah was at the stove. Asher and Nomi sat near the table. The moment he laid it down, the air changed. Nomi stood. He found us. Thorn looked at her. He hasn't. Not yet. Ash's hands curled into fists. He will. Not here. Leah stepped forward, eyes scanning the sketch of herself. You don't ever do this, she said. You didn't ask for us. I didn't ask for trouble. Either, Thorn said. But it came and you're still here. That means something. He looked at Leah. I can go into town tomorrow. Make it legal. Ashes stiffened. Legal howl. Anam on paper means no man can claim you. Not even Riek. If I marry one of you, the law protects you. Nomi's breath caught. Asher frowned. That's not what we want. I'm not offering it as a bargain. Thorn said, you don't owe me damn thing. But it's what I can do, and I won't do it unless one of you says it yourself. The room was silent long enough for the fire to pop. Then Leah stepped forward. I'll take your name, she said. Conkle. Asher looked at her surprised, but said nothing. Leah moved to Thorn's side. I'm not doing it, Towhide, she said. I'm doing it because I feel safe here for the first time. Because you didn't ask me for anything. Because you stay. Thorn's chest rose once. Then he nodded. Then we go tomorrow. And just like that, the decision was made. No rings, no dress, no proposal. But for Leah, it meant survival. And for Thorn, it means something else entirely. Something he hadn't let himself want in a long time. A reason to stay alive. The morning they rode into Copper Run, the wind was still. Thorn saddled the man before sunrise. He didn't speak much, just tightened the cinch, checked the hooves, and handed Leah the folded shawl she'd worn that first night. She took it wordlessly and wrapped it over her shoulders. Her dress was clean, mended along the shoulder and sides. Still plain, still low at the neckline, the top curve of her chest visible when she moved. But she didn't fix it anymore. She didn't have to. Asha watched them from the porch with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Nomi stood beside her, hugging the warm blanket around her shoulders, silent but alert. You sure about this? Asher asked. Leah nodded. I ain't doing it for papers, she said. I'm doing it because I want to stop running. Thorn gave Asher a look. Firm, quiet. He wasn't going Torg. By the time they reached town, the sun was high and hot. Copper Run wasn't big. 3 streets. Wide, 1 main road, and a half-built church tower casting a long shadow over the marshal's office. A few faces turned as they passed. A few whispered. Thorn ignored them. So did Leah. She sat straight on the saddle behind him, her hands resting loosely on the horn. They stopped in front of the old, clapboard Cothus. Inside, the air smelled like ink and dried paper. Judge Conincade looked up from his desk, squinted through round spectacles, and raised a brow. Maddox, he said. Ain't seen you in years. Thorn nodded. Need to file marriage papers. The judge leaned back, looked at Leah. She willing? I am, Leah said, stepping forward. Her voice didn't shake. Kincaid stuttered her a second. You sure this ain't to cover trouble? It's to stop it, Thornisade. The judge shrugged. You know how to sign, miss? Leah nodded. Yes, Sir Dot. And that was all it took. Thorn signed first, then Leah. The judge stamped. Thepage slid a copy across the desk and muttered something about bureaucrats always being late with fees. When they stepped back outside, the wind had picked up again, dry and sharp, kicking dust along the boardwalk. They stood there for a moment. Leah looked up at Thorn. You're going to kiss me? She asked softly, but serious. Thorn glanced around the street, then back at her. If you want that, I wouldn't have signed if I didn't. She stepped toward him. Their height difference was clear. She looked up, shoulders steady. Thorn hesitated, not from doubt, but respect. Then he cuped her cheek and leaned down. The kiss was slow, solid, not showy, not rushed, but it meant something. It meant everything. When they pulled apart, Leah's hand stayed on his chest for a second longer than necessary. On third back, she leaned into him a little more. Back at the ranch, Asha didn't say much. She just nodded when Leah handed her the stamped paper. Nomi peeked over Asha's shoulder. Lips parting slightly, and she saw the name Leah Maddox. Later that night, they all sat around the table. The stew Asha had cooked simmered on the stove. A quiet calm settled in the house that hadn't been there before. Leah took Thorn's hand under the table, just held it. Her fingers were small, strong. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. That night, Thorn didn't sleep in his bed alone. She committed him after the others were asleep. She didn't ask. She just stepped into the doorway, the lamplight behind her catching on her collarbone, the curve of her chest where the neckline dipped. She looked at him quiet, and he stood from chair without saying a word. When she reached for his shirt, he let her. When she guided his hand to her waist, he didn't pull back. They didn't rush. There were no declarations, just the soft sound of two people who had cared too much for too long and had finally found a place to set it down. Bimmerning, she was still in his arms. And the house, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a place built from loss. It felt like home. Morning came slow and cold. The wood stove crackled in the corner, and outside, the wind rattled the shutters like it always did before the weather turned. Thorn stirred awake with layers still pressed against him, her breathing deep and steady, her hand resting flat over his chest. The quilt had slipped low, baring her shoulder and collarbone, her skin warm against the morning chill. She didn't wake when he rose, didn't flinch when he quietly covered her again. That was new. He moved through the house equitably, not needing light. His body knew every floorboard, every squeak. By the time he stepped onto the porch, the sun hadn't yet cleared the ridge. He sat rifle across his lap, boots cold, coffee mug in hand. It was routine, but everything felt different. He wasn't alone anymore. Inside, he heard movement. Bare feet on pine, a pan clinking on the counter. Asher up early like always. She kept the place running like a soldier ran a camp. There was no softness to her in the mornings, just focus efficiency. But she hadn't said a word about the night before, hadn't heeded to. It was Nomi who broke the silence. Just before noon, she came to him near the barn, barefoot, dragging a warm blanket around her shoulders. Eyes looked clearer than they had in days. "I want to stay," she said, voice low but firm. Thorn turned to her. "You are. I'm in, even if they come." He nodded once. "They'll have to go through me first." She looked down, then back up. "You do that for all of us, for family," he said. She smiled, just a little. By late afternoon, Leah joined him out near the fence. She wore one of his old flannel shirts over her dress now, sleeves rolled high, a thin belt tied at her waist. She looked different, still air, but steadier, less hunted. She leaned against the post beside him. "You ever think we'd come to a place like this?" she asked. "I didn't think much about anything before you three showed up." "You regret it?" Thorn looked at her, shook his head. "No, a moment passed." She nudged his arm. "I was worried you'd be cold in the mornings. I've been cold for 10 years. She smiled. "Not anymore." Later that night, the quiet was broken by hooves. Foragers. They came slow down the main trail. No torches, no banners, just the sound of iron and saddle leather cutting through the dark. Thorn stepped out onto the porch with a rifle already loaded. Asher stood behind him holding the second rifle. Leah was inside with Nomi. Shutters closed, lamps out. The riders stopped just beyond the fence. One of them stepped down. Broad shoulders, clean coat, well-groomed beard. "Riek," he called out calmly that evening. "We're just looking for what's ours." Thorn said nothing. Riek continued. 3 scores. One of them tall and loud. One with a limp, one a little too young. Belonged to me. Took off about a month back. There's a bounty on all 3. Thorn raised a rifle. Slow, deliberate. They belong to no one. "And there's no bounty for married women." Riek chuckled. "You married?" "One. She took me name," Thorn said. "So if you're looking to claim anything on this land, you'll be meeting I am first." Silence stretched. Then another rider shifted in his saddle. "You're going to start a war over women." "Maddox, I already did. A long time ago," he said. "But this time I'll finish it faster." Behind him, Asha stepped forward, not afraid, not shaking. "You've got 2 minutes to turn around," she said, voice flat. "And I suggest you use both." Riek looked at her. "You always had a mouth, and I'll still have one when you're gone." Thorn stepped forward. "You want to push this? You won't make it off this land." "I won't ask again." The wind picked up. Riek looked around, saw the fence line, theatric windows, the steady hands. He wasn't ready to die for it. He spit into dirt, then turned his horse. "Not worth the lead," he muttered. "Let him rot out here." The 4 riders turned and rode off slow and bitter, but they didn't look back. Thorn stood still until the sound of hoof vanished over the ridge. Then he lowered the rifle. Behind him, the door opened. Leah stepped out, eyes wide. "They are gone?" she asked. He nodded. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around his waist, pressed her face into his chest. "Why'd you do it?" she whispered. He rested his hand on her back. "Because you're mine now." And this time, she didn't correct him, because she was. The days that followed passed quieter than anyone expected. Riek didn't return. No more riders, no more threats. It left a tension in the air, something like waiting for a storm that never came. But Thorn kept watch just the same. He checked the traps more often, rode Tharage twice a day, made sure the rifles were cleaned and loaded. Inside the house, something else shifted. Leah began sleeping in his bed each night without hesitation. Her presence no longer felt like a visitor's. She folded her clothes beside his, stirred the stew pot when he was late returning, leaned her head on his shoulder during long silences. They didn't speak much of the marriage. There was nothing to say. It wasn't romantic in the way most would expect, but it was real. It was calm and it was chosen. She had started planting Gagan. Winter. Vegetables this time, low to the ground. Asha helped her clear Thelis Road that morning, while Thorn repaired a sagging section of fence. He watched them work together, quiet and steady. Neither woman smiled often, but both of them had begun to move with more ease, their shoulders less tight, their eyes no longer scanning the tree line every 5 minutes. At supper that night, Nomi spoke more than usual. She had begun to read slowly, with Leah guiding her through the words in a weathered prime thorn had dug out of an old trunk. The girl still didn't like loud voices strangers, but she no longer looked like she was planning to run at any given moment. That was something. Escher sat at the table afterward, her arms folded, watching Thorn over her cup of coffee. "You meant what you said, Sheest." "I usually do," he said, about all of us being family. He met her eyes. "I didn't say things I don't mean." She nodded slow. "I ain't want to be owned." "You never were," Thorn said. "And no one here expects you to be anything but yourself." She looked away, jaw tight, but her voice softened just a little. "I just don't want anyone mistaking kindness for permission." "They won't." That night, Leah stood beside the window, brushing her hair slowly. Thalamplite caught on her collarbone. The front of a dress opened just enough to show the swell of her chest beneath the fabric. She wore it that way without shame now, without apology. She turned that to him. "You don't look at me like I'm broken," she said. "You're not," he replied. "I thought I was." "You're not," he repeated. She came to him barefoot across the creaking floor and sat beside him on the edge of the bed. "I didn't want to need anyone," she whispered. "Canning ain't weakness," Thorn said. "Staying is harder than running." She nodded, then leaned into him, his arms wrapped around her. Slow, steady. She pressed her forehead to his neck, her voice low. "I'm late," she said. Thorn didn't react right away. He pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "You show. I've counted. It's not the first time I've worried, but this feels different." He searched the face. "You want that?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But with you, I don't feel afraid of it." He nodded. "Then we take it one day at a time." They didn't speak after that. There was no joy or panic, just a quiet understanding. If it came, they'd face it. If it didn't, they'd still wake up in the same bed beside the same person who had never asked for anything but presence. In the early hours before dawn, lay her cold against him, her hand resting over his. Outside, the wind shifted again. It was colder now. The seasons were turning, but the house held warmth. And for the first time since the women had arrived, the past no longer felt louder than the present. The snow came earlier than expected. By late October, the higher ridges were dusted white, and the mornings turned bitter. The wind came down sharper, and the animals drank less. Thor made a second chimney for the band stove, fixed the lack in the roof himself before the freeze could settle into the beams. He'd spent 15 winters up there alone. He knew what was coming, but this one was different. Leah sat in front of the fire now with Nomi cold beside her, wrapped in a quilt and trying to sound out words from the same warm book. Asher had taken to the fields and firewood like a foreman, prepping the root cellar, salting down the last of the venison. There was no question anymore whether they were staying. They already had, and Thorn had changed. He caught himself smiling more, not wide, not often, but now that it surprised him. He still didn't speak much, but the silence in the house didn't carry weight like before. Now it carried peace, shared rhythm. No one asked him for more than he could give, and somehow he gave more anyway. That morning, Leah stood beside the stove, staring down at the pot of coffee with a hand resting over her lower belly. She hadn't said anything new since that night weeks ago, but the way she moved slower, the way her appetite shifted, the way she kept unconsciously touching her middle, it said enough. She turned when she felt his eyes on her. He was sitting in the rucker by the window, boots off, cup in hand. "I think it's real," she said. He stood and crossed the room. She didn't flinch. He placed a hand over hers. "Then it's ours," he said. She looked at him, eyes wet but steady. "You shall," he nodded. "I never thought I'd be a father again. Never thought. I deserve to be. But this ain't about the past." I sauntered just then, carrying in a bundle of kindling, the cold still clinging to her shoulders. "There's tracks near the edge of the ridge," she said, dropping the wood near the stove. "Small ones might be a lake calf. Could be meat." She looked. Between them, noticed Leah Shand, said nothing, but something softened behind her eyes. "I'll hunt it," Thorn said. "I'll go with you," Asher replied. "No need. I know. But I want to?" He nodded. They left at midday. The snow was light, barely covering the ground just enough to quiet the world underfoot. They didn't talk much as they rode toward the ridge. When they dismounted near a line of junipers, Asher finally spoke. "You're not what I expected." "I never was," Thorn said. She looked at him. "You think I'm angry all the time?" "I think you're carrying a weight no one helped you with." She considered that you helped us, but we never really asked why. "You didn't need to," he said. "Some things are just right when they happen." They tracked the deer in silence. Took down a young buck before dusk. As I gutted by the stream, Asha paused. "Leah told me." He stopped cutting, looked at her. She said she thinks she's carrying. He nodded once. "She is. You ready for that?" "No," he said honestly, "but I will be." That night, they returned with the meat. Nomi ran to meet them in the yard barefoot in the snow until Asha barked at her to go back. Inside, Leah stood on the porch, both hands clasped together waiting. Winthorn climbed the steps. She took one look at him and nodded. "I'm sure no," she said quietly. "I missed again. And I know." He wrapped his arms around her without a word. That night they sat around the fire, all four of them, plates full, stomachs warm. The storm outside was building, the snow thickening. By the hour, but no one seemed to mind. Asha leaned back in the rucker, eyes half shut. "I don't need papers," she said. "Don't need promises. But if you ever want to make this permanent, I'd stay." Thorn looked at her. Nomi giggled softly from under her blanket. "You've already stayed," Hesed. "That's what counts." Leah reached for his hand and pressed it to her stomach. And in that moment, there was nothing missing. No loose ends, no debts owed, no danger left. Only 4 people had come through hell in different ways. Now under one roof with one name and one future. The storm raged through the night, but inside that cabin it was warm and they stayed.